This is Brainy Podcasts with Soraya Shaw and Tracy Filler, inspiring creativity and innovation through evidenced neuroscience.
Okay, so Tracy, we're in a really exciting part of the world, aren't we? In life and business and what people are doing. When we first started this whole conversations with what was it, nearly 2 years ago now, 3 years ago about AI, it was such a new concept that no one really understood what was happening or how it was going to impact or how it was going to develop. And I read this the other day that AI is racing ahead faster than the Industrial Revolution, but our brains haven't had a software update in over 200,000 years. So, how do we make sure we're using AI wisely rather than letting it use us? And I think you and I have done so much work around this over the past 2 years, thinking about it's about you were mentioning just before the behaviors of people and what that means, because a lot of people, and I know I've felt it at something I was doing this week, AI actually made me feel a bit thick because it was thinking so fast and so well. I was like, oh my goodness, I should have been able to do that. What's happening to my brain? So I think we're in this space that you and I are really interested in is how is it affecting the brain? How does it affect how people come to work or want to come to work? And how do you really look after people's brain capital and their brain health? So you're using that AI, but you're still getting all the best from your people.
Yeah, and we are in a transition, and I love that quote. I'm glad we've started with that.
Mm.
Before we hit the record button, we probably had some things that we should have captured. So, for example, what happens if you, as a leader, do not determine how you're going to utilize it in your organization? What's your AI strategy across the organization? Because if you leave it to chance, you're going to have everything from no engagement to reliance to using it in a way that we're now seeing it being utilized, where it actually works alongside and we collaborate with to get better output, which is obviously where organizations want to be. And if they're not focusing on it, and if it's not on their agenda and it's not a discussion in their boardroom, they aren't potentially going to be here at the end of that revolution.
Yeah.
And that quote is really quite strong. And as we've, you and I've had to adopt it, always say we either innovate or we die.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's something we've been talking about across the podcasts, how companies are using it. And you and I have been talking about, and we've been talking to lots of people about it, how there are some companies that are just adopting it because they think they should. Other companies that are like, well, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing about that. And those who are really doing a thorough kind of audit on why are we using it? What do we need from it? Because also you've got AI agents now going on and LLMs and, the whole, it's just exploded much more than as we've said, we're actually here to think about the people and the talent and their brain health and how they prosper. We're not tech phobes. We don't really get that, although I think we should be pretty proud of ourselves. I think we've done very, very well, quite frankly.
I
Um,
agree.
so I think one of the questions is, where in people's organization are they designing against how the brain naturally works? So people actually thinking about that. It's all very well thinking about what is AI bringing and how's that going to impact the business. But you can have AI, but you still need people who are running it. You still need the brains behind it. I've been doing something with AI recently, and I realize it can't see. It needs me to be able to tell it what it's seeing and what it needs to do, and that whole interface between it. And I think that's a really interesting area because you need people's brains and they need to be motivated.
Oh, I love the idea that it can't see, which of course is obvious.
Yeah.
But that's quite interesting because that took me straight to Stephen Covey and how he always said that people create things twice, first in their mind, and then they actually go ahead and
Yeah.
execute it. And so I guess if we think about that yin and the yang with AI, that's essentially what's happening is you're using it as that visionary, but you're creating the vision
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
them to work with.
So it's all about collaborations. As you and I have been reading about, there's a lot of people who just default to it. Maybe that's an age thing. I don't know. If you've grown up with smartphones all the time and tablets, and being online, maybe that's a much more natural feeling, perhaps for other generations and different people who need that dopamine rush of getting that satisfaction of achieving something and doing something. So you don't default to something else. You want to have the power over it. But equally, how do you create that balance? How do companies create that balance? And I think the big question you and I were talking about is, how does leadership, what is the role of leadership here? Because it's absolutely, the C-suite, the boards, the real people who are, especially as companies are becoming flatter, and we know that they're employing less entry people, and there are a lot of jobs that are sadly disappearing. But equally, there's a lot of opportunities for new jobs and new ways that never existed. What was the stat? I'm probably making this up slightly, but I think by 2030, there'll be another, I don't know, 4 million new jobs or something like that. It's massive. It's not little at all. And you know me in figures, I always forget them. It's just not my natural default.
Me too.
But it's what hidden drains are quietly eroding people's motivation and capacity that leadership needs to think about. It's not just about the tech.
No, and it's about how we're working with the tech. And
Yeah.
so listening to that just reminded me of a conversation we had a few weeks ago where I was saying how irritated I was getting by lazy posts out on social media.
Yeah.
Where it was obvious they'd just thrown something into, for example, ChatGPT and gone, well, that'll do, copied and pasted it, probably not with the correct spelling or with incorrect punctuation.
And those long dashes.
The long dashes and the language systems that chat naturally works with, unless you feed it and work with it and get it to almost take on your persona. And you said, is it just us that gets bothered by that? Does that bother other people? But I do think there is, as we're evolving, as we're learning, there are things that are becoming not acceptable and things that people will just get rid of. Their brain will reject it. And, we naturally distort and delete anyway.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we can't cope. We have overwhelm.
Yeah.
So are there things that we are naturally rejecting because we see it as purely AI generated? And that, for me, says or suggests that human power. Ross talked about the fact that the future is human powered. If we're not being the power behind it, it has limitations.
I completely agree. And I think what you and I have been always, going back to our adapt or die in the whole premise of the podcast, which is about innovation, creativity, and critical thinking, is that if you're trying to get companies to have a competitive edge in this very turbulent time we're all going through, if you're just churning out the same old that everybody else is doing, where's your competitive advantage? Where's your creativity? Where is your innovation? Where is your really questioning things that a human brings to something? You and I have done things on chat, and we've looked at on AI, and we've gone, that's not right. What's it talking about? But other people could have just let that go.
Yes, exactly. And we've learned that, I know we want to leave people with tips today, as well as just pulling it and sort of having a slight different lens on protecting that human behavior so that it gives the right output for organizations.
Yeah.
But we've learned that challenging, pushing back, working with it gets better work for you as a final output.
Yeah.
And being clear about the lens you want it to have on the piece of work you're working on with it as well. So being the brutal advisor or sharpening up the message, whatever it is that you're telling it to do, if you're not putting those prerequisites into the way you're working with it, it's going to limit the quality of what you get from it. So as we used to say about computers back in the day, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah. So actually you could be making your AI lazy.
Technically you could.
Getting it to be using it's not using its brain, is it? It's using its learning.
Oh, I love having an argument with it. It's amazing what it comes back with.
Yeah, well, I tried to use a sense of humor the other day and it didn't get it at all. Didn't find it funny. Did not find it funny. But there was a stat that I was looking at that AI lowers our cognitive load by 32%. So that's very positive. And it can increase productivity by 60% when you're using AI properly. So it comes back to, how are you using AI? What are you using it for? And it suggests that if you're lowering people's cognitive load and increasing their productivity, what are they doing instead? How are you feeding their creativity, their innovation, their sense of self, their whole You know, if you go into work and you feel that you're not contributing, you're not adding, psychologically you're not feeling very safe at all. You're probably losing your confidence, you're mistrusting yourself, you're questioning whether you should be there or you shouldn't. All those awful, awful things that you and I in our work so hard to kind of make sure that people perceive those in a very different way. So how do leaders ensure that whole mental well-being and that brain health is being protected in their organizations to get the best from people? It's still all about the best from people.
And it's about stretch as well.
Yeah.
Because if that cognitive load is being supported, then what are they, as you say, what are they doing instead? And that has to be challenged. That comes back to the things that we know are important to the human brain, but also important to innovation and development of an organization's products or services. And that is about stretching and challenging the thinking, the critical thinking, the chance to reflect, the chance to look back and go, what was good, what wasn't, what should I do differently next time? It gives people the space to do that. But if they're not using it for that, the business isn't benefiting, and nor is that human brain.
And what that makes me think about, which you and I talk a lot about, is the whole neurodiversity. So actually, what can really benefit now is neurodiversity, and actually recognizing that everybody that sits around that table, and what you were talking about before, about there are some people who are early adopters, those that aren't, you know, how are you getting the best from all those brains around your table? Because they're all different. And if we're in this tumble dry world, as I like to talk about, and now we've got AI as well, plus everything else that's going on in the world, that's another leadership responsibility, is about how do I get the best from all those diverse brains? And it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity that hasn't really existed before, or been recognized perhaps so much before.
I think it's probably the biggest change since we moved into the .com era, you know, where people went from what's going in our catalogue and our brochure to what should we put on our website. It's a massive shift of how you leak out and communicate.
Yeah, it really is. It's about, as you've just mentioned it, critical thinking. I know you and I have done some really deep dives with AI, and I have to admit, sometimes I found it really exhausting. And it has made me think very critically. But to my point, it has made me feel exhausted. I know you and I have talked about, wow, my goodness, that was just so exhausting. How do I get my thoughts together? What do I think about this? What do I agree with it? Don't I agree with it? So I wonder whether there's also something here that, you know, people need autonomy. They need to kind of, we've talked about the default mode network and how important that is. So do companies also need to be thinking about, if you're going to ask people to take that deep dive and to really challenge their thinking, that you need to give them the space to almost have a rest, to be able to put all that thinking together, to make the connections, to actually give it value. So is that, we talked about the 4-day week in our last podcast with Charlotte Ray. Is that another case for a 4-day week, where you're giving people those days just to kind of be able to put their thinking all together, make sense of it, and actually then be able to come back with something that can add real value and help growth?
And if I'm sitting in the persona of a leader of an organization right now where we are economically challenged, you can see why that is such a brave decision and very bold to go against your instinct to get people working harder. That old adage of smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
It's really easy to understand and really hard to adopt and lead that initiative in an organization. And the 4-day week really demonstrates how it pays dividends.
You made me think then about brain capital. That's what you're talking about, really, in a way.
Yeah, it is.
So, and you know, and it's an emerging concept that really companies cannot ignore it anymore. It's a critical economic asset to any organization, is what is your brain capital. And it's not just about well-being initiatives and all that nice kind of nicey stuff. It's being able to use all the brains in your business. That's going to be your competitive advantage in its collaboration with AI, because the brains have got to direct the AI to actually get some great thinking, some great ideas, and building it. And there was some research that was saying that if you just get someone to do give AI a task and AI does it for them, people's whole motivation and sense of self and achievement drops off the scales. Whereas if you actually go to it with an idea and you want it to be built on, And then you can do the critical thinking and the exploring. And as you say, all the kind of really deep prompts that you're asking it about, well, are you right? And what's wrong? And all those kind of deep questions. Then you actually have an output that's actually worth something. And I know what you and I do all the time is when we get an output, we then look at it in our own language and we go through it. I've gone back to printing out paper because I know that's how I work better. And I can then put it all together and go, no, I agree with that. No, I don't agree with this. So that, the research is showing that actually you want people to be able to go with an idea and their own thinking, and then for AI to contribute and help them with it almost.
Yeah, we sort of alluded to that earlier on, and I've sort of written down that one of the strengths of how to use AI, because I really want some tips to go forward, is that use it to help shape your thinking, structure your thinking, and refine the output.
Yeah.
To be those structures rather than starting with the create this for me, do this for me.
Yeah.
That's the brain that likes to use water, goes the easiest route. Somebody that uses the muscle of AI to really push the boundaries of their own thoughts is going to get the best out of AI.
Yeah. And equally there, if you're not using your brain and your brain is a muscle, your brain will just stop. It'll just atrophy and it's no good at all. So to your point, it is about you've got to think first and then use AI second.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I had a conversation with somebody the other week that did exactly that. And they were asked a question on some analytics and some data that had come back on one of their clients. And they went through, did some research, put their thoughts around what they saw, what they noticed, and then popped it into chat to tidy it up and put it into some clear communication. And that enabled them to get that back to that person very quickly.
Yeah.
And the feedback from somebody else that was CC'd was, oh, you did that very quickly. Did you just throw it into chat?
That's a shame, isn't it? I mean, that is going to be the outtake for a lot of people. But if that person went in with their own ideas and their own thinking and an objective to come out of it, that's pretty demotivating. Well, straight away, that's another lesson for people, isn't it? Be careful what you say and recognize how people are using it.
Yeah, because I mean, gosh, that takes us back to psychological safety. But if there is no clear remit from an organization on how people are utilizing these tools, you're going to get that kind of disruptive, negative conversation around pieces of work that would not have been questioned in the past.
Yeah.
So these are the things. And kind of one of the things that was on our list was how AI fits into the values of a company. And for me, that triggers straight into that dilemma of, because it creeps out in this kind of mistrust of good work.
Yeah. And I think just building on that, there's something around, we know that AI hallucinates a lot, so people's work can be judged because of that. But there was an interesting article I was reading yesterday that was one of the reasons it hallucinates, tech is updating itself all the time, is because almost AI is now becoming competitive with other AI. They want to be seen as the best. So it doesn't want to let you know that it doesn't know. So therefore it will make something up just to make itself look, like it's good, which actually, when you think about it, is such a human behavior. I've known people in the past who've made things up and you're like, oh my goodness. And then you go and check it and it's just a load of, whatever. So that's quite interesting. How much is it mimicking from us? I know that comes from its learning, but that's in a way, and I probably don't understand all this properly, but you've got to be so careful about what you're putting into it for what you get out of it.
As you consistently say, you've just got to sort your question out.
Yeah.
And that's for our brain, but it's also for AI, because it's what the brain needs.
So all of a sudden we're unraveling. This is what I find so interesting. It's not just about technological advancements that's happening around us, but it's actually how is it impacting human behavior and the way that we live our lives and the way that we perceive ourselves.
It's the way we dance with it in the workplace.
Lovely.
And that's why I think the value systems of an organization, it's really important, because the obvious thing is to inform your workforce. We're going with this. So, for example, my husband's company, they're for Microsoft. They don't have access to ChatGPT. They have to use Copilot. But
So
they have a series of a series of training sessions where it's a mandatory learning, where they have to show up, listen, understand how it's used, and how they want them to use it in the organization.
Interesting.
So
Yeah,
the first thing we need to consider is how you inform, and are you making decisions on which tools are in and which tools are out of your organization?
Yeah. Which then leads on to, in a way, if you're directing people so much, where are your people getting their autonomy from? Which we know is so important. And autonomy can suggest working by yourself, which then makes me think about you can become quite lonely just working with AI. How are you part of a team? How do you develop relationships? How do you keep that social part of your brain really engaged as opposed to becoming quite siloed almost?
You find a great friend that you do a podcast with.
No, not everyone can do what we're doing and be lucky enough to do it and have a laugh. That's for sure. But it's brilliant. Very good answer. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Because we want to make connections, don't we? And we want to make sense of the connections our brain's making.
Yeah.
And, to be fair, as a consultant, having chat to talk to at any time I like to, night or day, is quite useful sometimes.
Well, it has, wasn't there something about somebody who married their AI,
Oh my
you know,
God.
which is just bizarre. And that, I mean, the dangers are, we know that so many companies are using it for therapy, for coaching, for very intimate relationships. And it's very good at it can say the words, but it can't actually feel.
Yeah, and remember, one of the other things that you were saying it also does is it's built to reassure you, and the way the management system works is that it wants you to be happy. Ultimately, it wants to please you. So if you're happy with how it's responding and putting stuff together for you, you'll come back and use it more. So it's almost feeding that early dependency. And I remember saying to you about 6 months ago, I feel like I can't function without running it through chat first, because I've got to that point of using it to refine, using it to sanity check, be my sanity checker. And I've now moved on from that again. And my next stage, I have a much better marriage with it now. It's it gets used for the things I want it to use it for. But as I say, I use it to shape, structure, and refine.
I think you and I we were also talking about this the other day. You can actually find yourself going down a rabbit hole sometime with AI. And sometimes I actually find myself taking longer to do things
Yeah.
because I've gone down that rabbit hole because it's
But
raised something new for me, or you want
it
to
forces you
perfect
to
it,
think
or
about something else, doesn't it? That's what we
yeah,
said. And I liken that, which is why I went back to that .com era, of when we first all got Google as such a stronghold search engine, and you'd land up having 20 tabs open.
I do that all the time. Yeah.
I mean, I haven't changed that habit. It's a bad
No,
one.
I know.
And I do like the little minimize thing. But
Yeah.
AI is kind of doing that for you with every conversation you're having with it. It's the equivalent of having 50 tabs open.
Now, you and I could talk all day. We know that. We're very, very good at that. We have such fun together. There was another stat here, which is, and I've got all the resources for this. We're not just making this up. There's a 40% reduction in neural connectivity in creativity related brain areas among heavy AI users. So the neural connectivity that we all need in our brains to reach ideas and thoughts and the whole prefrontal cortex, I suppose it is, that actually they're saying that there's a 40% reduction in that neural connectivity. So we're reducing those brain networks actually talking to each other, especially in creative areas. So that's another thing to be mindful of, is if people are making less connection because they're becoming more reliant on AI, and going back to the 4-day week piece about how do you get the space to think and formulate and let the subconscious part of your brain actually activate, how do you actually look after that in people? How do you ensure that they're not reducing their whole cognitive growth, I suppose? Because then you talk about neuroplasticity and making new connections, but also neurogenesis and making new neurons. But if you're not actually exercising those parts of the brain, then you're losing all that wonderful connectivity that makes us human, that's so important. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I think it's created more questions than answers, perhaps, for people that are listening in. My head's going straight away thinking about how we can answer some of those things, because I don't think we know the answer to some of that at
Yeah.
all. I think the starting point is accepting and acknowledging that this is, I mean, we know it's changing the shape of the brain. Understanding and recognizing that, are we responsible for it takes me straight into what's professional development and what's personal development, because we all have to have responsibility for our own brain and how we're using it to some extent. I think frameworks are really important in organizations to guide people, but also we know it's not going to have a big impact on everybody's piece of work. We're assuming that everyone that's showing up to work, it's going to have a massive change too.
Yeah, and that goes back to your early adapters and your laggers and everything
but
like
even
that.
function, even job function. So, for example, and of course, we're talking about AI like it's just come along. It's been in software systems for a very, very long time. For example, the order picker in a warehouse, their revelation came when they were barcode readers coming in.
True.
So, there's been this evolution that's worked its way into software for many, many years. So this isn't the whole of your operational community, depending on where your business sits. Is it in a service space? Is it in actually moving product and making product? But I suppose I'm thinking of chatbots. Let's take that as an example. Let's start looking through that, because what we're seeing there is a rejection. There was a real adoption. Great, everyone had a chatbot. And now companies are now looking at very closely, because of the things that have trickled out that have not been picked up through that chatbot and passed to a human, that they've now had an increase in complaints from their consumers and their customers. So there's now having to be a real reevaluation for where they use it and to what extent before the human kicks in. So for me, that's quite an interesting lens to start to unravel some of the answers to what you've just posed there. And what it does is it shows the shortcomings of where the human is the power and the voice.
It also amplifies to me how much we need, brain capital and brain health particularly becomes very important. So, how people are helping to keep their brains healthy, not just through diet, exercise, electrolytes, brain supplements, vitamin supplements. Because if people are becoming more sedentary, because they're working more at their desks, which I suppose they always have done, but it's a danger it will become more. How do we really make sure that we're looking after people's brain health? Because everything comes from our brain,
we started cycling last year, a bit late to take that up. And this year, Paul was doing some reading and he's like, okay, I think we need to start putting some electrolytes into our water bottles.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you the energy kick that gives you when you're sort of at that 20 miler and you kind of go, oh, got another 5 to go.
Yeah.
I don't feel that. It doesn't kick in. And he said it's the same with energy packs. If he does 50, because he does more than me, at that 30-mile point, he stops and he has an energy bar. And it allows him to do the 50-mile rather than stopping at the 35. The brain must have the same kind of capacity limits and the energy boost.
Yeah, we've talked loads about this, haven't we? The 20% and how you need to look after your brain, and hence why rest and sleep is so important, and your diet. What we're talking about, it's almost like a whole different step into a new world, isn't it? We're talking about technological changes that are changing our lives, but also then the impact that's having on us as people, both personally and professionally. And so I hate this word, but I haven't found a replacement. It's so holistic, actually. It's like a real 360 that's kind of showing up for me.
So as an organization then, if I'm a CEO listening to this, where do I start? Do I start with my human power, or do I start with how we're currently using AI and doing a bit of an audit? What should we be doing?
I think you just hit it on the head. You've got to do an audit. That's exactly where you'd start. Why are you using, how are you using it? What impact is it having? How do you look after your people? How do you protect them? How are you using it to, going back to our tumble dryer analogy, and what we focus on in our podcast, how are you using it for creativity and innovation and adopting, and so you don't die? So it's part of not just what system do we put in and what do we train it on. Like you were saying, it's like the whole culture becomes important.
Yeah, it's the whole system.
Yeah,
It's a systemic picture,
that's
is what
it.
we're saying there
Systemic.
then.
Yeah, yeah. And then thinking about future-proofing skills, how are you changing roles? I know some of my client, they're not employing the new graduates that would originally have come to a profession and started learning. AI has adopted a lot of those tasks, but they're now thinking about, well, how do we bring people in? Where do they fit? What's their And a lot of them are actually looking at people who are very good, not at numbers anymore, for instance, but very good at communication skills or very good at different kind of skills that their industry is going to need in the future because of the way it's all shaping, it's all changing. And I know that's your heartland, that whole area of building and retaining talent. And that's where it
Yeah.
becomes so important.
Yeah, and the skill sets that are being acknowledged. So, I've always said that you focus on the behaviors, the inherent behaviors and the value base of a human, and then the technical, not the other way around,
Yeah, yeah,
because it's nearly always the former that cause the problem with a misfit to your
yeah.
organization. And for them as well, they're not enhancing. I mean, I've always said it, but I genuinely believe people do not turn up to do a shit job.
No.
So if they are, why? What's sitting around them? Where are the inhibitors? And how well are we supporting a change perspective and
Yeah.
outcome from them?
But that literally links into transformational leadership. What kind of leader are you working for? What role model? And also the whole psychological safety, trust, being seen, being respected, your voice being heard, being listened to, all those things that you and I believe so passionately in. So I'm really conscious that, again, you and I have been having a wonderful chat like we always do. But do you think it's time to talk about the audit that you and I kind of have sort of developed?
Well, it's lucky that we agreed that the audit was the right thing, and that really was natural. That wasn't
Yeah, it
like I
was. There
was
was not
suddenly pushing
scripted
it.
at all. Yeah.
Honestly. But yeah, we decided that what we do this time is slightly different, and we have put together a bit of an audit questionnaire. It's not too long, but it'll allow you to, if you haven't thought about AI yet in your organization, you're a bit behind where a lot of your competitors will already be. So therefore, this is a quick fire audit to say, what do I need to start thinking about? Forcing questions into your brain for you to work out. So we have given you the right questions to think about.
And I think it's equally useful for companies who are doing it to go back. An audit should be something that's continually alive as their business is transforming using it, and different issues are coming up, different problems are appearing. So I think it's a good live diagnostic for anyone to start using in their organization, their business, whatever they're doing, or even as an individual thinking about it.
Yeah, definitely. And you might, as an individual, you might want to look at that to say, how am I using it? Is there something I've missed? And is there something we talked about today? We wanted to look at where companies are either overplaying or underplaying, and whether
Yeah.
individuals are overplaying or
Yeah.
underplaying with AI.
Yeah.
So a good sanity marker for anybody, but we have written it for those leaders having to make strategic changes to the direction of their organization and how they operate day to day.
Yeah. Do people need to send us their email us, and we can email them back with the document? I think that's the best way, isn't it?
They can email us. The information is all on Brainy Podcasts. Or, of course, the quickest way is to just click the subscribe button so that we've got their email to send it to them.
Yeah.
So
technology.
Anybody that is a new subscriber, we are going to make an assumption that they are interested in our discovery, and they will get it. So that's existing subscribers, because we trust you're still with us. We know you're still listening. And any new subscribers will automatically release it.
Yeah. I think this is a lovely thing I've been looking at doing kind of briefings for different businesses on things that I'm looking at and giving that to people. I think this is a lovely idea for us to develop with all our podcasts, that there's a relevant giveaway that we have at the end that really gives benefit and value to people.
We are in the background to the podcast being recorded. When you go to the website, you'll see just how much we're developing in terms of pulling this all together, the findings from our fantastic guests, our conversations that were sparked by a private one that we thought other people might want to listen in on. And that's always been the way we've tried to do these podcasts. But we realized they've kind of grown more than a couple of legs. And we are now putting that into a structure, into programs, our framework, and we have really focused framework. This is Brain 1, which is our
5 brain strategy. Brain 1 is creativity.
There you
looking
are,
after your
which is
creative
all
brain.
Looking after our creative brain. We haven't even touched on the creative industry and how this has blown the waters on the creative industry. But yeah, we're trying to take care of everybody's brain capital as we navigate our way through AI transformation. So yeah, I think you're right. We want to make sure there's definite giveaways, but we also need to start getting commercial about our own brain and how it's being used by the clients around us. And hopefully expanding the client base that we both work in together.
Yep.
Bit of a plug for us.
Yeah, well, that's so what. I mean, that's what it's all about. It's good, isn't it? We all share, and we want to give to our clients and make sure that they get the value and the growth, and all our listeners as well. It's really important.
I just want to finish with why we've run this particular episode, because we know the future is in collaboration between human and technology. We're talking very specifically about AI, but really it's that tech revolution that has started and accelerating at pace not seen before, as per your quote at the beginning. So bringing us 360. That's why we've done it. And it's about that transformative technological place, but making sure the human stays front and center.
Yeah, very much so.
That's our purpose today.
Yeah.
So I hope we've done that for everybody.
Yeah.
Gosh, there's lots more we could have talked about, practical toolkits, but I think the diagnostic will be the thing that really gets your brain finding the right answers for your organization and you as an individual. We hope we've done that for you today.
That's our gift to you.
Our gift. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're the gift that keeps on giving.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, we'll catch up with you all later. So thanks for listening.
Thanks. Yep. See you at the next one.
Enjoyed this episode? Listen to more at brainycasts.com.